My name is Emily, and this story is not just about me, it's about my daughter Teddy, my husband Travis, and how one small box changed everything in our lives. When I first met Travis, I felt like I was finally getting a second chance at happiness. I had been through a painful first marriage and was raising Teddy alone. She was only 2 years old when Travis came into our lives. But from the very beginning, Travis never made her feel like she was someone else's child. He read her bedtime stories, held her hand on her first day of preschool, and stayed up late building her dollhouses. Eventually, when we got married, he legally adopted Teddy. In our home, we never used the word stepdaughter. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. I thought marrying Travis also meant I was joining a big, loving family. His family seemed so close-knit, always planning cookouts, game nights, and holiday gatherings. His mother, Lorraine, was the center of it all. She had a strong voice, organized everything, and had an opinion on almost every topic. At first, I admired her. I wanted her to like me. And for a while, she pretended to. She smiled at dinners, complimented my cooking, and even hugged me when we said goodbye. But slowly, I noticed little changes. She would forget to include me in group texts, make comments about how I was different from the women in their family, or mention how I hadn't grown up with the same values. It was never direct, always subtle enough to make me doubt myself. Then came the part that hurt most, how she treated Teddy. At first, Lorraine acted like she accepted her. She would bring Teddy a small toy or a book during holidays. But it was clear Teddy was never treated the same as her cousins Maddie and Jonah. They got invited to sleepovers, wore matching Christmas pajamas, and received expensive gifts. Teddy would sit quietly, often left out, while Lorraine doted on the other grandchildren. One Thanksgiving, Lorraine gave each grandchild a personalized plate with their name painted in gold. Teddy's seat had a plain extra plate from the back of the cabinet. That night, Teddy quietly whispered to me, "Maybe she thinks I'm just visiting." I didn't know what to say. Travis heard it too. He clenched his jaw but stayed silent. That was the first time I sensed he was finally beginning to see what I had seen for years. Still, we kept attending family gatherings. I told myself it was important for Teddy to have family memories, even if they weren't perfect. I convinced myself that love didn't have to be shown with gifts or matching pajamas. But the truth was, I was lying to myself. I was staying silent because I didn't want to be seen as the troublemaker. I didn't want to force Travis to choose between his mother and us. But every time I swallowed my feelings, I was teaching Teddy something dangerous, that being treated as less was something we simply had to accept. As time passed, Travis and I began having quiet arguments late at night, after Teddy went to bed. I would gently bring up how Lorraine was treating Teddy differently. Travis would listen, but he always looked uncomfortable. He'd say things like, "I know, Emily. I see it. But I just don't know how to handle it. I don't want to hurt my mom." And every time, I would ask, "But what about Teddy?" He would nod, promise to talk to his mother eventually, and then go silent again. The problem kept building, but nothing changed. By the time Christmas arrived that year, I was emotionally exhausted. Still, I packed the matching outfits for the kids, baked extra cookies, and wrapped thoughtful gifts for everyone. I told myself, maybe this year will be different. But deep down, I knew better. What had changed was me. I was no longer hoping for Lorraine's approval. I was watching. Waiting. Ready for the moment when silence would no longer be the kind thing to do. That moment came faster than I expected. We arrived at Lorraine's house, beautifully decorated for the holiday. Her giant artificial Christmas tree sparkled with gold ornaments, and there were so many wrapped gifts under it you could barely see the floor. It looked magical, but as soon as I stepped inside, I felt my stomach tighten. Teddy walked in ahead of me, wearing her sparkly gold dress that she had proudly picked herself. In her hands was a small box she had made for Lorraine in art class, a wooden trinket box, painted carefully, with glued rhinestones and Grandma written in glittery letters across the top. As we greeted everyone, Lorraine barely looked at her. She quickly hugged Maddie and Jonah, complimenting Maddie's hair and joking with Jonah. Then she glanced at Teddy, took the small box from her without even opening it, and set it on a side table like it was nothing. Teddy's little face fell, but she stayed polite and went to sit beside Maddie. After dinner, it was time for the big gift-giving tradition. Lorraine always made a show of it. Sitting in her favorite armchair, she called each child up one by one like royalty. First, Jonah received an envelope stuffed with cash. Everyone clapped and cheered. Then Maddie unwrapped a brand new iPad and a shiny bracelet made of real silver and crystals. Lorraine hugged her tightly. Finally, Lorraine called Teddy's name. There was a pause as she held up a small gift bag. "This is for you, sweetheart. I didn't want you to feel completely left out." Teddy walked over quietly and took the bag. Inside was a simple lavender-scented candle with a tag that read, "To Travis's girl." No toy. No envelope. No sparkle. Just those words that felt like a knife. I looked at Travis. His face was tense, his hands tightly clasped. But again, he said nothing. Teddy sat back down next to me, resting the candle on her lap. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. But I could see her slowly pulling inward, trying to protect herself. The rest of the evening went on like nothing had happened. People laughed, ate dessert, and toasted champagne. But I was barely hearing any of it. All I could see was my daughter shrinking, again, right in front of me. Later that night, when we got home, Travis finally spoke up. "I told Teddy months ago," he whispered. "If Grandma ever did this again, she could give her the box." I stared at him. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "She remembers. And she's ready." That night, after we put Teddy to bed, I sat with Travis at the kitchen table. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "You gave her that box months ago?" I asked softly. Travis looked exhausted, like he had been carrying the weight of this for a long time. "Yes," he admitted. "I didn't want to drag you into another argument with my mother. But I needed Teddy to feel like she had some control, like she didn't have to just accept being treated like she doesn't belong." He paused, rubbing his hands together. "Do you remember Jonah's birthday? The backyard party?" I nodded. I remembered that day. It was the first time I truly saw how deep Lorraine's favoritism went. Travis continued. "Lorraine called the kids for cake. Maddie and Jonah got slices covered in frosting and sprinkles. Teddy got a small end piece, no candle, no decoration. That night, Teddy asked me if she was even part of the family. His voice cracked slightly. That's when I knew. I printed her adoption papers again. I packed the box with them, a photo of me holding Teddy the day we made it official, and I wrote a letter to my mom. I told Teddy she could give it to her if she ever felt ignored again. Tears filled my eyes as I listened. All those years I had been hoping Travis would stand up for us, and he had, quietly but powerfully. The next morning, Teddy woke up determined. She picked out the same sparkly gold dress, the same glittery headband she had worn on adoption day. She carefully placed the small red-wrapped box in her lap for the car ride. As we drove to Lorraine's house for Christmas brunch, the air felt different. It wasn't filled with hope or nerves, it was calm. Teddy didn't fidget. She didn't ask if we thought it was a good idea. She was ready. When we arrived, everything looked the same. The wreath on the door. The scent of cinnamon and roasted ham. The perfect table settings. But for us, it wasn't the same. We weren't just guests hoping to fit in anymore. We were walking in as a family, strong, united, and ready. We settled into Lorraine's perfectly decorated dining room. Everyone chatted, laughed, and passed dishes around. Lorraine, as usual, complimented Maddie on her dress 3 times but never once mentioned how beautiful Teddy looked. Teddy stayed quiet, sitting tall in her chair. She barely touched her food, her hands resting calmly on the small red-wrapped box in her lap. After everyone finished eating, dessert was served. The usual holiday chatter filled the room, but then, Teddy stood up. At first, nobody noticed. The adults were too busy with their conversations, and the children were distracted by their desserts. But then, softly but clearly, Teddy spoke. "Grandma," she said, looking directly at Lorraine. "Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." The entire room froze. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the soft Christmas music in the background seemed to fade. Everyone's attention turned to the little girl standing bravely at the head of the table. Lorraine gave a tight, confused smile, clearly trying to control the moment. "What's this, sweetheart?" she asked, like it was some harmless joke. Teddy didn't answer. She gently placed the box in front of her grandmother and calmly sat back down beside me. Under the table, Travis reached for my hand and held it tight. His face was steady. This was the moment he had quietly prepared for. Lorraine slowly unwrapped the box, still trying to keep a fake smile on her face as if she was performing for the rest of the family. But when she lifted the lid, her expression immediately changed. Inside was a small framed photo, Travis holding Teddy on the day of her adoption. The photo captured his wide smile and Teddy's little arms wrapped around his neck. Below the picture, in gold letters, it read, "Day 1 Dad." Beneath the photo was a sealed envelope. Lorraine's hands trembled as she opened it. First, she pulled out a copy of the official adoption papers. Travis's name clearly listed under father. The court's legal stamp shining at the bottom. She blinked, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then she unfolded the letter. It was written in Travis's handwriting, and as she read it silently, I felt his grip tighten even more around my hand. Her face slowly lost all color as her eyes moved through each word. The letter read, "Mom, if you are reading this, it means you've hurt my daughter again. Not just my daughter by love, but my daughter by law, by promise, and by choice. I have watched for years as you've treated Teddy like she doesn't belong. I hoped you would change. I prayed you would open your heart. But if she ever had to hand you this box, it means you couldn't. Teddy is my child. She is your granddaughter. And if you cannot love her equally, then you do not love me. I will not let my daughter grow up thinking she has to earn her place in this family. She already belongs. She always has. If you cannot accept that, you are no longer welcome in our home or in our lives. Travis." When Lorraine finished reading, her hands shook, and she dropped the letter onto the table as if it had burned her fingers. The silence in the room was thick. No one moved. Even Maddie and Jonah froze, sensing that something very real was happening. Lorraine's face twisted as she stood up so quickly that her chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. She pointed directly at me, her voice shaking with anger. "This is your doing. You turned my son against me." I stood up slowly, keeping my voice calm and steady. "No. Teddy gave you a gift, a chance to finally see her. You chose not to." For a moment, all you could hear was the soft crackling of the fireplace. Teddy sat quietly, watching. Not scared. Not confused. Just watching the truth finally unfold. Travis stood up beside me, looked his mother in the eye, and said, "We're done." I helped Teddy into her coat. No one said a word as we left. No one tried to stop us. No one called after us. We walked out with me, my husband, and our daughter, leaving behind a house full of decorations, fancy centerpieces, and empty smiles. The ride home was quiet. The tension from the confrontation still hung in the air, but none of us spoke. Teddy sat in the back seat, calmly staring out the window. She still held the candle Lorraine had given her in one hand, but the red box was now empty. Its purpose was complete. After a few minutes, Teddy softly broke the silence. "Do you think she read the whole letter?" she asked. Travis looked at her in the rearview mirror, his voice steady and full of reassurance. "Every single word, sweetheart." Teddy smiled. Not a big smile. Not dramatic. Just a small, peaceful one, like something inside her had finally settled. She didn't need her grandmother's approval anymore. When we got home, we all sat in the living room for a while without saying much. I watched Teddy carefully, worried she might suddenly feel sad or overwhelmed, but she didn't. Instead, she looked lighter, like a weight had been lifted from her tiny shoulders. In the days that followed, something beautiful happened. There were no angry texts from Lorraine. No follow-up phone calls. No guilt trips. Just silence. We didn't reach out, and she didn't either. And for the first time in years, there was peace. I had expected Teddy to ask about her grandmother. I thought she might wonder why we no longer visited or why the holiday parties stopped. But she never did. Instead, I saw something shift inside her. She stopped glancing toward the door during family events, stopped asking why her name was missing from group photos, and stopped trying to figure out why she didn't get the same presents as her cousins. She had let go. Then, about a week after Christmas, a small padded envelope arrived in the mail addressed to Teddy. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a tiny heart charm and a small handwritten note. It was from Maddie, her cousin. "I'm sorry Grandma was mean. You're my cousin forever. I picked this with my allowance." Teddy read the note twice, smiled softly, and slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. She didn't ask if she could wear it every day, she just did. And I let her. That simple little gift meant more to her than any expensive tablet or thick envelope of cash ever could. In that moment, I realized something powerful: children don't need perfection. They need to feel chosen. They need to feel seen. They need to know they belong. And now, Teddy finally did. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a change in Travis too. For years, he had carried guilt for standing between his mother and his daughter, guilt for not speaking up sooner, guilt for trying to keep peace while Teddy quietly suffered. But after that day at Lorraine's table, something lifted from him. There was no more hesitation in his eyes, no more struggle inside him. He had made his choice. And he stood by it, without apology, without conditions, without regret. One night, I found him sitting on the edge of Teddy's bed, watching her sleep. The soft light from her night lamp made the silver heart bracelet on her wrist sparkle. He looked up at me, his voice soft but full of emotion. "I should have done it sooner, Emily." I smiled gently and whispered back. "You did it exactly when she needed you to." We didn't try to replace the holidays or fill the empty space left by Lorraine's absence. Instead, we built new traditions. Smaller, quieter, but more meaningful. We baked cookies together and delivered them to our neighbors. We built pillow forts in the living room and watched movies in our pajamas. We played board games and decorated cupcakes on weekends. There were no fancy parties, no grand performances, no forced smiles, just real moments filled with love, laughter, and peace. Sometimes people talk about cutting off toxic family like it's easy, like you make one decision and move on. But it's not like that. It still hurts. Even when you know it's the right thing to do, it still leaves a scar. What hurt the most was realizing how long Teddy had been shrinking herself to fit into someone else's comfort. I had allowed it for too long because I thought staying quiet was the kind thing to do. I was wrong. That day at Lorraine's house wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making a scene. It was about Teddy finally taking her place in a room where she had always been treated like a guest. It was about her quietly but firmly saying, "I belong here." And it was about us, as her parents, standing behind her, not just with words, but with action. Time passed, and we never returned to Lorraine's house. No more birthday parties. No more holiday dinners. No more pretending. But even without all that, our little family grew stronger. Teddy never spoke about the box again. She didn't need to. She had already said everything she needed to say that day when she stood at the head of the table in her sparkly gold dress. But I kept the box. It now sits safely in my bedroom drawer, right next to Teddy's first baby shoes and the hospital bracelet from the day she was born. Not as a reminder of the pain, but as a reminder of her strength. Of the moment she claimed her place. Of the moment she refused to stay invisible. She was only 7 years old, but she taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. Family is not who shares your blood or your last name. Family is who sees you, hears you, and stands by you when it matters most. Teddy has that now. Because she claimed it. And in doing so, she gave it to all of us.